I was very worried about him not accepting my religion and my race. But like I said, he's different from the rest of the guys that I know of. He's cool. He's like, no, it doesn't concern me. I mean, like, I love you for you, not because of your religion or your race.
I think it was more because of the slowing down that we started, like, instead of focusing on the physical part, it was more like, what are your interests? What are, granted there was, the lust part of, I want to be intimate, but you find more of a connection, intimate through connection of like knowing the person rather than physically.
Take a girl and a guy, and they fall madly in love and form a family. Sprinkle in some counseling degrees and a doctorate, a dream of transforming relationships as we know it. And 20 years later, we give you power couple Dr. Ray and Jean Ketkodian. And this is their podcast, Couples Synergy.
Welcome back to another episode of Couples Synergy with Dr. Ray and Jean. I'm Dr. Ray.
And I'm Jean, and this is our podcast about love, marriage, and relationships.
Check us out online at couplesynergy.com, and be sure to subscribe to our podcast or send us any suggestions on topics you'd like to hear more about. And now on to Couples Synergy, an in-depth look at love, marriage, and relationships, where we bring you our experiences working with thousands of couples for over 15 years.
Every day we get to hear intimate details about a couple's celebrations, disappointments, and everyday challenges. We've often wished these stories were shared because we know we are more similar than different. So we've not only created an avenue where you can hear about people's intimate lives, but an atmosphere where people come over to our home pub, pour a drink, and share their stories.
People like today's guests, Lawrence and Noreen. Welcome to our podcast. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Hi.
Hi. This will be a treat for all you listeners out there because this is actually Noreen's first trip to the United States, right?
Yep, my first trip.
First trip, and you've been here for about 2
weeks and 3 days.
2 weeks and 3 days, and I know you've been seeing a lot of great stuff, including cows.
And horses.
And horses.
And raccoons.
And raccoons. Oh, those are little nasty buggers there. Raccoons. Well, before we get to your story, why don't you guys tell us a little bit about yourselves? How old are you, and how long have you been together?
So I am going to be 37 next month.
I'm 36.
And we initially met and started, I guess, dating, that line between when you become friends and, that was kind of a mixed thing. But from the point I asked her to start dating, we've been together for 4 years.
4 years.
Wow, okay.
And where are you guys from?
I'm from Singapore.
And United States.
Cool.
And what do you do for a living? And what was the coolest thing that the two of you have ever experienced together?
So I'm a director of security, private security.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a paralegal. I'm doing intellectual property.
Right.
And I guess the coolest thing jointly we've done, I would say, on our honeymoon, going to Thailand and hiking and just, getting out in nature and just spending time and experiencing new things, not like a new thing for me or a new thing for her, but jointly it was a new thing.
Do you agree with that?
You'd say the same?
Yeah.
So can you guys tell us the story of how you met?
So I actually have friends that are living in Singapore that I had served with when I was in the
Thank you for
Marines.
your service.
And I had been coming out of a relationship, and I was looking to travel more, that now I had more free time. And they're like, hey, come on over and, sing Singapore. It's a beautiful country. It's very safe, very clean. And I'm like, well, I don't really speak Singaporese. And they're like, it's English, you idiot. And I'm like, okay. And
So English is the language of Singapore.
yes, they were a British colony. And they actually gained their independence in the 60s. But, they are, just like the United States, they were a colonial country at one point.
Are there other languages that are spoken there?
Yes, we have English is the main language, and then there's Malay, and then Mandarin and Tamil,
Wow. Okay.
These are the 4 main languages.
And how many languages do you speak?
I can speak English, Malay, Arabic, and some Mandarin.
Wow.
Yep.
That's great.
Cool.
So when she starts like getting upset with me, I'm like, I don't understand. So. But yeah, I had my friends had reached out and they're like, hey, come on over. You know, we'll show you around. And I was getting excited. I planned my trip, and I was at the O'Hare, and they're like, hey, hate to do this to you, but we've actually got to go away for a business meeting, and we can't show you around. And I'm like, oh, great. But we have family friends that can, and they put me into contact with Noreen's father, and I flew over, they met me, and they just, as a family, they all kind of showed me around. And she actually has a twin sister and a younger sister, and the mother, and just as a family unit, we were kind of shown around, and just she and I kind of hit it off, and we kind of kept in touch, and just learned that, hey, even though we were raised in different, entirely separate countries and separate
Cultures.
communities
Yeah.
and niches and stuff, we had a lot in common, and as the more we talked and the closer friendship it got, then it became something a little bit more.
So your friends ditched you
Yeah.
while you were at O'Hare ready to go.
Yep.
Wow. And then, so now you show up in Singapore and you're shown around
It's like
by
a foreign exchange student.
right
Yeah.
by a family that you don't know. Wow.
What did you think, Noreen, of him?
Oh, when I met him the first time, I just look at him like as a friend. So we show around Singapore and the food, and then when he has to like return back to the States, he will be like, "Oh, I'll be coming back," and I'm like, "Oh, okay, whatever." I'm like, "Yeah, he won't come back," because in my mind it's like American,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you were just friends at this time.
Yeah, we were
Okay.
friends. And then we started texting. And then I still remember exactly like 2 months after, he texted me. He was like, "Hey, you know what? We should be more than friends." And I'm like, why is this guy asking me? Like, we just met once and we were texting like every day. And I'm like, okay. So in a way, it's like he fall in love with me first before.
And then he grew on you.
Yeah.
So you were surprised that he had feelings for you.
I thought he was just like playing around. I mean, like someone who came from another country, met you the first time, and then texted you, and then 2 months after asking you out, and then you're like, okay. So at that time I was just like, okay, if he's playing around, I want to play too. So so when he fly back again here in Singapore, I'm like, okay, he is for real. So that's when I started to have feelings for him.
What was it about the other person that you fell in love with?
For me, it was not only just the we had common things like, for example, we both love reading. She's like, oh, I'm a gamer girl, which she's not really. Like, I wouldn't call it a gamer girl, but
I stopped gaming like when we dated.
So there's the mutual interest on just knowing that there's something that we could start building our life off of, not just hey, she's female, I'm male, that's what it takes. No, it's more like as you start looking long term, it was like, well, how would I picture us sitting at home, what are we doing type of thing, and are we going to both be happy in our own lives, but also are we going to be happy sharing our lives together.
Were you thinking this in the first trip?
No, I was thinking it more like when I started, like probably a few weeks before, I was like, hey, maybe she'll be interested in dating me. When I was raised, it was always, you don't date and then date and then date and date different girls. It was try to find that one person and think of just that one person, and that's who you're supposed to spend your life with. It wasn't like, hey, you date 5, 6, 7 girls.
So it's more like a commitment.
Yeah, and then and you kind of focus on that one person, and then, I was always taught, you're not really going to find the one magically. It's more you find someone that is a good person and you grow together. That you should find that one person, and where their flaws are, you kind of build into that, and they do the same with your flaws. And that's how my parents were, and I guess they were the role model for me, and that's what I started thinking of her is, we do have mutual interests, and we do have things that are in common that we can start kind of, it's not really, our rough edges aren't going to always scrape together. We're just going to kind of mold together. And I started kind of picturing that the more and more we talked. And it was when we're saying we're texting, we're talking about like every day for like probably 2-3 hours a day.
Wow.
So
Yep. Texting every day. Then we video chatted like 3-4 times a week.
Yeah.
But for some reason, after we got married, we never video.
You stopped video chatting?
Yeah. She's like, I'm busy. I've got you already, So.
Well, what was it about him that you fell in love with?
Because he kept chasing me. No,
Persistent.
no, because in Singapore we have like, foreigners. So we have people like white people in Singapore, like British, Australian. So they're more like rowdy and they're more like boisterous. So when he asked me out, at that time I'm like, is he playing with me? So
You thought he was the same.
yeah, I'm sorry. So because I've never dated much. Me and my siblings, I have 2 sisters. I've never dated, like never.
Is
ever.
that part of your culture?
No, it's not. It's just me. So
Okay.
my mom was a bit worried. She thought I'm like unique. Yeah. So and then I dated once with a wrong person. So it's like after that I'm like, maybe I'm not the kind who has to be in a relationship. So when he comes, and then he started texting me, I'm like, okay, maybe I should give it a shot.
And you were like 33?
I'm 36.
But when you guys met?
I was 30.
30.
No,
30.
32.
32?
Yeah, you're 32 because it's
Yeah.
been 4 years.
Oh, okay.
So you hadn't really dated and you were in your 30s.
Yeah, and then when I heard that he's in the Marines and all that, I'm like, oh, okay, this is why. Because we have Marines, like back then when I was in high school, at that time Singapore have like this kind of like Marines coming over. They were like stationing there, I think like taking a break or something. And I saw with my 2 eyes how like they would jump from the top of the escalator at the bottom. And at that time I was in high school. I'm like, wow, these guys are duh. So in my mind I was like, I thought he's like that, but apparently he's not. He's different. He's unique. So
Unique, good, not special. When you say unique for us, it means something
no.
totally different.
What I meant is like I find him different.
He is different.
from
He's
from
very different.
the rest of.
Did your family have any concerns?
They thought like I gave up, like I don't want to be in a relationship. Yeah.
But they were okay with you dating him?
They're okay. My dad, first impression, really likes him. Even my mom too. Yeah.
So, it's kind of unfair for us because we kind of know Lawrence for a while now. When you talk about the Marines being boisterous, we kind of know that.
I've already warned her, like among my group of close friends, that I'm told multiple times to calm it down.
So this is very interesting, right? Because you meet her family, you meet her, and then you start to have these feelings, and you're in a place in your life that you're not dating, and you've almost sworn off relationships, and then he kind of worms his way into your life.
Yeah.
And did you guys have any concerns about like the difference in cultures and cultural background?
I was very worried about him not accepting my religion and my race. But like I said, he's different from the rest of the guys that I know of. He's cool. He's like, no, it doesn't concern me. I mean, like, I love you for you, not because of your religion or your race. And then I spoke about the distance. That's like one big thing that like kind of like makes me like reconsider, like, it's hard. I mean, like, distance in a relationship, but he made it work. He kept flying back and forth. So like,
How long
I know that
between
he's a
when you
keeper.
guys started texting till you saw each other again?
sorry, say again.
How long until you saw each other like the second time?
Like, he will come like every 3 or 4 months. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's been 15 or 16 trips so
Would you
far.
stay with her family still, or
So when I initially was flying, because of her culture, when we started dating and her, she had told her dad that we'd started dating, then the Islam kicks in and we were chaperoned the entire time.
okay?
So
That's part of the culture.
Yeah.
Yes.
that is part of the culture, and I say that with parentheses because
Not exactly culture. It's more like my mom.
Yeah.
She's very protective
Mhm.
of her daughters.
it's like a traditionalist. But modern day, just like all other cultures, everything adapts. So like modern day, you see people that are in that faith and they date just like everyone else, but her mom is kind of like very protective and traditionalist, and
Right.
she's like, no, Papa, you go follow them and make sure he doesn't do anything he's not supposed to do.
So it was your dad that chaperoned.
Yep, I'm for that.
So when you said that you were kind of afraid that he wouldn't accept your religion, we're talking about Islam, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And in Singapore, is that the leading religion?
No, it's statistically it's 14. There's like 14% of the country. It's a melting pot of Southeast Asia.
Mm-hmm.
So Singapore is very westernized, and that was one of the shocking things for me, is going over there and like, oh my gosh, they have everything we have, And I remember we were walking through like their pedway system, like we have here in Chicago, and smelling a very faint smell, and I'm like, oh, that smells familiar, and I go around the corner, and it is the popcorn. Garrett's popcorn. I'm
Garrett's
like, are you
popcorn.
kidding me?
Like everything's just there.
Yeah, so it's so they are very much a melting pot. So you have Hindi, Islam, Christian, Buddhist, everything is there.
Mm-hmm.
They are 14% by statistics of Muslim, but it is, I believe it's closer to like 30 or 40% Catholic, and just a little of everything is there.
What was your experience like that? Had to slow down the pace of the relationship, especially physically, right?
Yeah.
Did that change something for you as a person, bonding with someone and being part of a relationship that might have been different?
Yeah, I think that instead of rushing to be physically intimate with someone, it was more, you actually get to know them, and especially when their dad is right there behind you watching you, it was like, her dad is really cool. He was just like, I understand you guys, it's okay to hold hands and things like that. It was whenever her mom was with us as a family unit, we were going out, and I was kind of always teasing her, like, oh, you can't touch me. Nope, mom's watching, and stuff like that. And her mom's like, don't be naughty, so I was always teasing her and having fun with it. And I think it was more because of the slowing down that we started, like, instead of focusing on the physical part, it was more like, what are your interests? What are, granted there was, the lust part of, I want to be intimate, but you find more of a connection, intimate through connection of like knowing the person rather than physically.
It kind of forced you to focus on nurturing the emotional connection then.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. No.
That's an interesting thing, I don't know, when my parents got married, nobody had sex before they got married, right? And then it's kind of like, who knows now, whatever people choose. And I think it's so easy to jump into the physical, but I think that leaves something else out, that you don't really get to have more of the heart-centered connection. Would you guys recommend that?
I think it's definitely something that is on a case-by-case basis, simply because it really worked for us, because we also have the long-distance factor in place.
Right.
But if a couple is very physically intimate and that's their focal point and it works for them, that's great. But at the same time, for us, it wouldn't have worked, because we would have been like, oh, we can't physically be together, and because we're separated by so much distance, if our focus point is that physical connection, it wouldn't have worked. But the fact is, even when I was physically there with her, it was about the connection, about what we're actually saying to each other and finding interest in each other.
Mm-hmm.
We could continue that when we were 9,000 miles apart. That's like 15,000 kilometers for you.
Okay.
That's another thing you had to adjust to, right?
Yeah.
And was that different for you than the other guy that you dated? The one you said I had one boyfriend and he wasn't a good pick.
What?
So you dated someone before.
Yeah, a very wrong person.
And how is this different for you than that one?
It's very Lawrence is of course it's different. He's different. He's honest. He's good. He's handsome. He's cute. He's nice. He's generous. He's kind. Yep.
So you were able to have more trust and feel safer in this
One thing
relationship?
about Lawrence is he's very honest with everything. So I think that's what makes one of the things that I love him.
Mm-hmm.
He's very honest.
I think honesty in a relationship is probably the greatest stressor if you don't have, and fairly traumatic because
Well,
you don't know what you're dealing with.
It's like the mortar,
Yeah.
that holds bricks together.
Yep.
It solidifies a relationship. So yeah, absolutely.
So at some point, were you raised any religion?
No. Well, my mother was Baptist, and my biological father was a Protestant. I was raised more like the Baptist thing, and but as I was what they would call in Singapore a free thinker. So while I had a thinking that God did exist, but I didn't know what in form. It wasn't this is the direct path to it, and this is the rules you have to follow. That wasn't really instilled in me, as it were. So it was more, in my heart I feel there is a God, but does that mean that it is strictly by these rules? That's where I wasn't given any guidelines or whatever. My mother wasn't like, hey, you have to go to church and you have to do it this way. She was very supportive of learn about everything. Find your own path, and that was one of the wonderful things about her as well.
So how did you make that decision is it to become Muslim? Is that the right way to say it?
Yeah, to become Muslim. And it was, for one, I understood that it would make our lives together a lot easier. I didn't feel that I was giving up anything to convert. It wasn't like, oh, I'm Christian and I have to convert, and all these things that I've followed up until this point I have to totally forget. And no, it was more, you are gaining something in addition to. It wasn't just like, oh, this is the path to her, because her parents never made that as a rule. They didn't say you have to convert.
Okay.
This is the only way you two are together.
Okay.
They were very pleased with that choice that I made, but it wasn't, this is a hard set, you have to do this. They were more, what makes her happy, and that's what we go through. But I felt that, I wasn't losing anything by converting. I was gaining something. It was a very easy process, to be honest, to convert and everything. It was more, I think the most difficult thing for me was just learning the Arabic to do so. But it was, since day one in that decision to do so, when I go to convert and everything, it was, I've been taught, everybody I've spoken to is, hey, it's what's in your heart. It's not, as Americans, we're thought the Middle Eastern Islam, and that's a very strict, and that's very, because we've gone to war to that and everything else. That's not the case. That's not what it is. We weren't fighting, Islam over there. It was fighting extremists, and we have those here in the States, and all the evilness that's in the world. Every religion, no matter who follows what, it's about who the person is and what good they are. It's not, these are the only things that follow. For our lifestyle, Islam is perfect, and that's what it is. And there are some relationship things that we're kind of still learning and working out and stuff, and it's like, hey, you're supposed to do this, and I'm like, oh, sorry, I'm still learning, that type of thing. I kind of get to use that as a
in terms of the religion or in terms of the relationship?
It's a little of both. So for example, for here, I was brought up as everybody's completely equal. Everybody, it doesn't matter if you're male, female, whatever. In a relationship, for us, one of the things is, hey, I'm supposed to be the leader, and I'm still kind of relying on her, like, hey, no, you're 50-50, and she's like, no, it's more like 49.9 and 51 point. You know, it's equal, but at the same time, because of the background, it is some things like, no, you're supposed to make the choice on this. I'm going to support your choice, but you're supposed to make it. And for me, there's still some learning curves there.
What would be an example of something like that?
So where we live, for example, I would pick that.
Okay.
Where she's like, you're supposed to pick where we are living at. Like if it's in a certain part of Singapore, as it is Singapore, if it's the United States, I get that choice. But at the same time, I'm like, hey, I need your input on this because it's a big choice.
And I know that you're working, you have a career, but the burden of providing would rest on your shoulders then, right, Lawrence?
It does. Now there is certain rules, like for example, allowance. The husband is supposed to give the wife an allowance.
It's actually called allowance?
Yes.
Wow.
It is supposed to be. It is called allowance. So it is. And this is something I recently learned, so correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
So essentially what it is like, hey, the husband is giving the wife an allowance for her to do with what she wants for that money, but that allowance is supposed to be applied to like house stuff, like getting groceries and things like that. Whereas the husband is in turn still paying for the house and everything else. And if the wife says, hey, I've put, I get $500 a month, and $400 of it's covered food. I get to spend the other $100 on whatever I want. It's my money. But at the same time, for us, it's, hey, she makes a salary. That's hers. That's, do what she wants. Well, it's more like, hey, she makes a salary. It goes into an account, and then part of it goes back to her. That's considered the allowance type of thing.
Okay.
In some degree, I guess in the States we would do that.
Yeah, like personal budget.
Yeah, it's what
spending
it is.
Money.
It's
sure.
So
just how people manage it.
Yeah, and that's essentially what it is. It's more like, hey, here. It's not like you're telling your kid like, hey, this is your allowance and this is what you get. It's more like just because the term allowance is applied, it isn't like what we would consider it, and that's what.
Right.
I guess
that's the connotation here in the United States with that word, right?
Correct. So, and it's I'm finding that that's a big part of it is just in the communication that we have. We have to have open lines of communication, and it's more like, hey, when there's a bump in the road, it has to be like, hey, this is what the meaning behind this is. It's more like, hey, you didn't give me an allowance. I feel like I feel like you're not supporting me in that method, and I'm sitting there like, you have your salary. It's we're trying to, I'm not understanding it fully, and it's like, no, this is actually what it means. This is what the significance of behind it is, and it's like, okay, thank you for teaching me that this is how we'll apply it, and we'll move forward from there.
What did it feel like for you for him to say he was going to convert?
I was happy because I know that because he's honest and he's nice, so I thought like, okay, so he said that he wanted to convert. I'm like, okay, that's a good thing.
But it wasn't a requirement for you.
It's actually a requirement to get married in Singapore.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
So I was like, okay, so which means he's serious about this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So to clarify, in Singapore, there are two different ways to get married. There is something called
civil marriage, and ours was
RAM. I mean, we went to RAM.
Yeah.
So there's Registry of Muslim Marriage, RAM. So if we wanted to marry in that fashion, I had to convert. But to get married, there was another means to do so. It just made our life easier for me to convert. But it wasn't like her dad was like, hey, you have to do it this form.
He's really interested in Islam. Like every now and then he would like recite some Arabic words. I'm like, wow, this guy is good. So I think that's what makes you interested in Islam.
Well, it's everything. It's not just it's the lifestyle's a little bit different as well.
What are some of the things you had to do in order to convert?
Well, no, to convert, you can do it at home. You don't have to go to church.
But yeah, there were some rules you had to follow.
Well, the traditional ones like no pork. I always was very strict on thinking, hey, you can't have alcohol. But, her dad actually clarified, like, hey, you're not supposed to. But say you're doing it for business or a one drink here and there. It's more like the intent isn't to fall down drunk and it's okay, that type of thing. But at the same time, I try to respect that and still not drink and stuff like that. But it's like lifestyle choices like that, things that you're not doing any longer, especially here in the States, the whole no pork thing, considering you go to any menu and you're like, ugh. It's like everything.
Yeah.
It's like, so that
we have Bacon Fest in Chicago, right?
Yeah. Yep. So it's things like that. But also, like, I think of myself as a very clean person in the initial part, but when I go to Singapore, she's like, no, you got to shower twice a day. I'm like, what?
Because it's hot and humid, so you need to shower twice a day. It's not like here it's nice and cool, even though in summer.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Oh.
I'm like, I'm not. Or
so, I mean, is that part of the religion, or is that just cultural because of the country?
Hygienic reasons.
Hygienic.
Yeah.
Okay.
she thinks
Is that all year round, even if it's not really hot?
It's all year round.
So you just shower
You
twice
need
a day.
to shower.
That's just
If you don't, you smell like, especially when you get on the train in the morning, you can smell like someone doesn't shower and the wind blows. Like, I hate that.
What about prayers?
So I'm still kind of in that learning it type of thing. So her father, for example, has shown me the method of prayer.
It's a bit heavy, but he's like, I don't want to push him. It's like slowly nudging him.
So there is like a specific methodology, like the way you stand and then when you kneel and stuff. And then later on, I'll learn the Arabic portion of it because that's a much longer item. I haven't been following, this many times a day, and I haven't done that. But there are things that I'm slowly kind of adapting to. For example, I do fasting for Ramadan. We just finished that. My staff really hate when I'm doing that because I don't get coffee in the morning, so they're like,
they have to get there on their own.
Yeah,
okay.
It is rough, kind of learning to do that. It just your body's like, hey, wait,
and that is sun up to sundown.
Correct.
Is there any other restrictions during that time?
You can't drink or eat during that time, and you're not supposed to have unpure thoughts. You're not supposed to think of sex or any of that things. You're not supposed to think of like anger towards anyone, or it's supposed to be a cleansing and period. And for me personally, it's more like, hey, it's the liquid part. I can go without food all day long. It's the liquid part, and then something else.
And like no water, even.
No water, anything.
Wow.
And if you're in Singapore and it's really hot and no water,
Yep, you get like you see puddle on the streets, you'd be like.
Oh, wow.
How has that enriched your life to practice that?
I've started fasting, you mean?
Mm-hmm.
My parents it's not really strict. They started, I think I started fasting when I was in 12 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not like the full 1 month, it's like half a month, which I'm glad. But I know some of my friends, they made the children fast, and the children was like 7, 8, and it's like, I mean, it depends on the parents, like how strict it is.
They fasted for an entire month?
Yep.
Well,
That's how they
sun up
train
to
the
Sun up
kids.
to sundown.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's how they train the children. So my parents is very relaxed about it. It's like, you go slow and steady. Don't push yourself. Yep. Even I started praying when I was like kind of old, 15, 16. Yeah. That's how I learned to pray, by copying my mom's, like up and down. I don't know.
Do men and women pray differently?
The man leads, the women follows. So it's like I just followed my mom, like how she moves. I don't know what's going on.
Okay.
Yep. So after a while, I finally got it. So that's what I want to do with him. Like
For
I don't
him
want
to
force
lead.
him. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it'll be a little easier once it's one of those things where you have to practice it to keep
And
fresh
you have to
on
learn
it.
it from her dad.
Yes. Like
And you practice it in the home, or do you actually go to a mosque to do this?
in the home.
In the home.
Like, you can go to the mosque. I was actually just asked her this the other day. It's like, so, like, Sunday's coming up, and here in the States, everybody's going to church on Sunday, and if that's what religion they have, it's with the mosque. I understand, the prayers go on throughout the day. Do you go there 5 times a day, type thing? And she's like, no. It's you can, or there's a ceremony after the prayer, but mostly, you can do it at home or in your house. If you're at work, you can kind of like here in the States, you can do religious accommodations and step off the side and.
So you could never go to a mosque and still practice.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that is all about what's inside of you. Like, you don't have to go like here. How there's baptism and you go to the church to do all that. That's not the case. To convert, you simply say the Shahada in your heart anytime, like at your house or whatever. As soon as you say it, you've converted, basically, is how it works. For over there, because there was legal pieces of us getting married, I actually did have to go and get a conversion card to show them, like, hey, and there are actually parts of Malaysia, if I want to go to like a specific mosque, I have to show that conversion card because they see a white guy and they're like, hey, you don't know.
What are you doing here?
Yeah,
Right.
So they're like, hey, wait a minute. But when I show them that, they'll let me into the mosque.
So does it depend on what form of Islam? Like I'm half Iranian, and in Iran, I think it's the Shiite Muslim, right? Is predominantly in Iran, and I know the Sunni are typically in Iraq, right? But I guess what form of Muslim, and I can just tell you, I don't know nothing really about the religion. My father is Zoroastrian, and I was brought up Catholic, so I'm kind of like a mutt, So what form of
schools?
Yeah, schools, I guess, yeah.
Shafi. Yep, ours is Shafi.
Which basically there are certain rules that go like
some schools you can touch a dog or something, like for yours.
For Shiite?
Yeah, Shiite.
I wouldn't know, but
But for Shafi, we are not allowed to touch dogs, and it's not because of that. I have a fear of dogs, like really scared of dogs. Yep.
So there are very commonology, well-known rules, like you're not supposed to consume pork or alcohol. But for example, let's say the alcohol piece. There are some schools where you can't even have it in perfume. You can't have it
mouthwash.
You're not supposed to have
like
any contact whatsoever with it. But then there are some that are like, hey, for medical practices, this is okay, and that there are
like
different
rubbing
rules.
alcohol.
Yeah, and they get a little bit more lax. I guess the best analogy would be here in the States. Look at Amish, the Dutch Amish.
Right.
There are some groups that are very, very strict, and they're very much no electronics or this and that, and other ones are a little bit lighter on that. With
like the Mennonites.
Yes.
Right.
So it's different approaches, I guess, from not just, hey, this is strictly applied to this school. It's more, this is the generalization of what the school is, and this is the philosophy behind it, but this is, in this group of that school, this niche of community, how are they going to apply it? And that's kind of what, and the outside application as well. Like, for example, Singapore is a very westernized, and they get a lot of influence from the West as well as other countries around the area. And with that, I guess they lighten the rules to some degree. And it in the turn comes down to what's in your heart. What is your intent?
So here's an interesting question. Like, what came first? Your decision to convert, or your decision to get married and engaged, or engage and get married?
I think that they were very closely hand in hand. When I made the mental thing of, I'm going to ask her to date me, because of my upbringing, it was, I'm going to ask her to date me with the intent to eventually marry, if it goes successful. Knowing that if I get to that level, if I level up, I'm going to convert for us. So it was all kind of continuous, because I'd had experience with, or I'd had exposure, not experience with, but exposure to Islam just in general learning.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was going through and learning about Buddhism and everything else, it was kind of with that exposure, I wasn't scared of it, I guess you could say. I wasn't fearful of I didn't have a wrong sense of that religion per se. So I always thought when we go to marry, or when we start dating and eventually get to marriage, this is 90% of the chance that this is going to happen as well.
Has that enriched your life?
Yes, I think it has. I think that I've always been a happy guy. I've been very thankful of my life, and everybody has ups and downs, but for the most part, it's, I guess, an optimist that I've always been. But I feel like it's kind of brought me closer to her as I learn about Islam and what to do and everything else. We as a family unit are getting closer. I love her with all my heart, and with that, it's also a way to show her that I love her too. Because by putting forth like, hey, it wasn't like, hey, I converted and now we're married and now that's the end of it. It's more like, as I learn and get closer to the religion and stuff, I'm also getting closer to her, because for me, this is something I understand it's very important for her as well. It's very much like when we have children, they're going to be raised in Islam as well, and that's.
I would think just the discipline and structure of it would be very feel like really safe and give you like a foundation. We practice 40-day spiritual practice, sort of similar, and that's how it feels when we're doing it. It feels like your life has more purpose and meaning, and you're not just doing what you feel all the time. And so that resistance of doing what you feel, I think, matures you, grows you up.
Well, I mean, besides that, the research shows that a common spirituality between a couple, it actually solidifies the relationship a lot more, and it's a very important factor, regardless of what that spirituality is.
Right.
So
also, because when we were dating, like when we were just friends, he's very curious. He'll be like, why are you doing this? How come? All sorts of questions. And I think he's really interested. Like when he came over, like to have lunch at my house, my parents' house, I think he's not used to the woman serves, like when we serve the guests from Malay, like we really serve, like put it on a tray, like, and then you bend over and then you put like the drinks on the coffee table. So he's not used to that. So he's very curious. He'd be like, why are you doing this?
Were you able to answer him? Or did you just learn it and you don't know what's...
I was like, this is how I do it. This is how I grew up. So he's like very curious. Like he wants to learn. Like, oh, okay, this guy really curious.
So in your culture, there's a very definite behaviors for women and men.
There's a specific manners.
What do you like about that?
You mean like how I grew up with? It can be sometimes very restricting.
Okay.
Sometimes, but I think like you get used to it. It's like natural.
Was there a time in your life when you were a little rebellious and?
Yeah, me and my sisters, we would do some rebellious things, but we get to cover it, so my parents wouldn't know.
What are some of the restrictions that are just for women?
My mom, she would like, you can't go out, like you have to come home at a specific time, like at 5. It's just so early, so it's like, where can you go? So what me and my sisters did is we would like cover for each other. Be like, okay, if mom asks, just tell her that, all right, I'm going to school or blah or whatever, and then she's like, okay. So we look out for each other. And I think when we were dating, Lawrence can see like, oh, you sisters are so close.
Did you always live with your parents?
Yeah, I've been living for like 3 years away from my parents because I thought I want independence, but I guess I still want my parents with me. So
is that common in your culture that women stay with their families?
No. In Singapore, the children tends to live with the parents. It's a common thing. So until you got married, and then it's your decision whether you want to stay away.
But
from
that's a
your family.
choice. You could live on your own
Yeah.
if you want to,
Yeah.
but most people don't.
So since you've been here, have you been noticing any of the gender differences here in the United States?
Gender differences.
Mm-hmm.
Not
Like how
really.
men and women are different here and how they act differently here in the United States.
I don't really notice.
You didn't notice?
Yeah,
Okay.
I don't really
I
notice.
think she was too busy with taking photos of all the animals, and all the buildings and stuff.
Well, I know in some Muslim traditions, like the spouse or women, they sit in the back seat of the car.
Oh no,
Not in your
Yeah.
country. Okay.
no, it's not like that strict.
It's not that
Yeah,
strict.
yeah.
Okay.
And like it's a very westernized country, but I found it very easy to adapt when I went over there. And granted, most of the Caucasian individuals over there are from Europe or Australia, but I felt like I was in a very, very clean version of any city in the United States when I went over there. I was like, this is great, you know? And so it was, culturally, it wasn't like a huge shock.
Mhm.
It was more like when we went to her family and stuff, and I was trying to learn, because if I'm going to be in that family, I didn't want to come in blind. And that's what I always thought, like dating is like kind of an interview. It's what you're doing. It's,
Right?
you know,
Applying for a job.
yeah, and that's one of the other things I loved about her was her family as a unit where they are a unit. Like if I'm marrying her, I'm kind of marrying the family too, because they are so close. And I think it would be wrong of me to say here in the United States we don't have that, because every family is their own little niche and everybody has their own, you know, grouping. Mine personally, we were very much if there's trouble, we'll help each other, but otherwise you're on your own. You know, I'm not really close with my own family, so to see her, how close she is with hers, you know, I was like, oh, I want that too. You know, that's great. I want.
Yeah, I think we've lost some of that.
Yeah.
What was it like for you over there? How is the culture different and how men and women behave?
So I guess because it's what district you're in, partially. If you are, it's a very touristy country, so to see like Singaporeans and stuff, I think as a community, one of the things that I saw was here in the United States, we're a very individualistic society. I'm more important than the society. I have my own rights. I have the Constitution protects me from all this stuff. Over there, they're more of a social niche. Like they
Very docile.
they do things like everything is done what is the better benefit of the community. For example, when you get onto the trains over here, it's whoever sits wherever, and it doesn't matter if there's individual that's pregnant or elderly or handicapped. Hey, I was here first. I don't care what that sign says. I'm going to do what I want, with rare exception. Whereas over there, it's very well known, like, hey, if you sit in those seats and somebody of elderly gets on, you are getting up for it, and no one even has to say anything. You see children getting up, or teenagers that are on their phones. As soon as they see, like, they look up and they see somebody who's elderly, they're going to move. It was refreshing to see that. Here, you know, we may have rules to say, hey, don't eat in this area, don't do this stuff. People still do it. But over there, if it's a rule, they all follow it as a society, which was really nice.
That's very interesting. And you know, when we say here, we are talking about Chicago, correct?
In Chicago, but
Right.
I also say here as well, like San Francisco.
Yeah.
I lived in San Francisco for 4 years, and
It's
it was
similar.
kind of similar. It was similar there.
Because I mean, we've had the experience of going down to Texas, and
Right. It's very
Texas
different in Texas.
is very different
Yeah.
as well. I mean, obviously, I don't know if a teenager would get up if on a
do.
train, but they are very
Yeah.
respectful, and you know, it's a very different culture. You know, they have much more conservative values. So I think that it really depends on kind of where in the country, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I would say as a whole, the United States obviously is going to be very different than the
Sure.
culture, you know, in Singapore. How did the engagement process happen? Because we haven't even touched that.
Yeah.
I don't know the difference, right?
The engagement, I didn't know. We just had like a family dinner, and he brought like a bag, a paper bag,
Yeah.
with
so,
a book, with like a thick journal book. So he passed it to my dad, and my dad was like, pass it to me. So I was like, why are they passing me this like a very thick journal book? So I opened it. There's a locker there. I opened it and I saw like pictures. He put pictures of the family, and then right at the bottom is he cut it like a hole at the back page, and the engagement ring was right in there. I'm like,
Oh,
I was like,
wow.
oh.
And then what happened?
I was like staring at the ring, and then my mom was like, oh, there's a ring inside. So I was like, oh, okay. So I just like took the ring, and like it's awkward because everyone is staring at me. So I'm like, oh, it's nice.
Because everybody knew that was happening.
I
Yep.
think
Yeah.
they knew except me.
Did you formally ask her, or was it just all done through that?
So initially, the entire process started the trip before that, when I believe it was her parents, the two of us, and her younger sister. We had gone, I was being chaperoned once again. We were at a butterfly garden, and her and her sister were off doing, whatever with a butterfly. And I was over with her parents, and I had, like you would hear in the States, I asked her father, like, hey, can I marry Noreen? And, they were excited. They were very happy. And her mom was like, you need to get her a ring now. And she was like, you need to get her a ring because that way other guys won't hit on her, type of thing. And I was like, well, we don't really do that our way, because I was trying to, I've always kind of mixed the cultures. Both, I wasn't going to sacrifice everything of my upbringing. It was, as a family unit, we were coming together. Should be a little bit of me and a little bit of her. So I was trying to respect everything they do, and from what I had understood and kind of conversed with her so duly, was that it was okay to wait to give the ring. It wasn't like I had to follow her mom's instructions, like, get her a ring now.
Get her off the market.
Yeah, so it was, I got the permission ahead of time, and then over the course of 3 months and stuff, that's when I had, gotten the ring. And I had engaged her sisters, like, hey, so there are like 1 million types of rings. What kind does she like? And, I was trying to get information from her.
Did you know her ring size?
I didn't. They got it for me. So
Look at that.
I engaged the family as well. So they were helping me out.
So was that kind of a traditional engagement for Singapore?
No, it's not.
No.
Nope.
What is it usually like?
I think it's his tradition.
Do they have a certain tradition that they do?
I'm not aware of.
Like the Malay,
Okay.
like, for example, how did your sister?
Oh yeah, my younger sister. So the guy's family would come over with food, with a feast, and then the parents would talk to my dad, we would like to, ask your daughter for engagement or something. There's a certain words they say it,
Mm-hmm.
and then my dad was like, okay. So yeah.
So it's the
That's like
parents that are
tradition.
actually
Yes.
doing the engagement, really?
So yeah, they would bring the whole family, like the parents
Mhm.
and the guy, and the siblings.
Is there any arranged marriage in Singapore?
No,
Okay. Was there ever?
not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
So one thing to understand also about Singapore is that while it is kind of a melting pot, they do make very clear distinctions of what type of Singaporean they are.
Mm.
So she is Malay Singaporean,
Mhm.
which means like her background and culture is coming from Malaysia. So there are Chinese Singaporean, and what other types?
Yeah, we have Malay. So it doesn't mean like you're from Malaysia. Like I was talking to his dad yesterday. Like my dad is Indian and Scottish, and my mom is Javanese from Indonesia.
That's
that
quite a
makes me
combination.
Yeah. But for some reason, I grew up, people talk to me in Mandarin because they think I'm Chinese,
Mhm.
which I'm like, nope.
Yep.
So so my race would be Malay, but doesn't mean I'm from Malaysia. So yep. So I have a friend.
Interesting.
His husband is Indian Muslim, and she's a Malay. But because of, I think there's a certain rules, like you have to follow your husband's race. So that child would be called Indian in the ID card or something.
So they have ID cards and distinction.
Yeah,
Yep.
like you have to follow the dad's, the father's, the race.
Yeah,
Wow.
so we have that here,
Oh, okay.
right? But it's very complicated now. You know,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like
the
our son,
categories don't work
who
anymore.
knows what our son is? He's such a
Oh.
melting pot.
Right.
Yeah, your parents are two different cultures.
Half Filipino, half Iranian,
Yep.
Oh,
and
wow.
then
So what do you call yourself?
a Filipinian.
Yeah, and all you know is American culture.
Right.
So, yeah, it's interesting, and it's a melting pot also there. So you guys have a decision to live in one or both cultures.
Mhm.
What's your preference?
Definitely Singapore, for multiple of reasons. You know, while I love America, you know, I've served in the military, and you know, one of the things that she makes a comment on is like, as we're going around, she's like, "Wow, there's a lot of flags around here." It's like we are a very patriotic country. We are very, it's what our upbringing is. At the same time, it's very easy to adapt to Singapore for me, just because of how westernized they were. I mean, they have McDonald's, so I'm good there. But when it came down to it, it's a lot of different factors. For example, they were recently actually just rated as the #1 country in the world to raise a child. They beat out Switzerland for
Wow.
that. They are the cleanest and safest country in the world. At the same time, they have a ton of freedoms. Like you would think that you always hear the faux pas of like, oh, their rules are so strict over there and this and that. It's like, you know what? There's rules that are good rules. It's like, don't graffiti or you're going to get caned.
Graffiti,
and,
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You don't do drugs, you know, things that are like common sense.
No chewing gum.
Yeah, no chewing gum.
No
That's
chewing
one of the
gum.
ones that are kind of, I think, silly, but at the same time, how many times if you walk down the street and see all the black marks, you know, how cleaner would we be without that? Little things like that, but for the most part, they leave you alone. They let you do what you want to do. You know, it's mostly it's a beautiful, clean country, and it's a very good society to raise individuals in. And I don't have to deal with snow, so there's
Right.
What was the time frame between when you guys got engaged and when you got married?
I think that we went eight or 9 months from that period. Part of it was like we got engaged, but also one of the cultural things is is it a dowry? Is it called a dowry or?
Yeah, dowry.
So they do have a dowry.
No, they do.
So I paid her dad a dowry.
How does that get negotiated? Like, how do you know what to pay?
I just talked to him, and it's just, hey, you know, for the dowry thing, and her dad was really cool about it. Like, oh no, you know, it's fine. You know, a little bit of he wasn't like strict. Like, from what I understand, some families are like, you have to pay me $20,000 and this and that. And no, he was very loving and very much like whatever makes her happy.
And what is the background of the dowry? What does it symbolize?
Or for the bride to spend it on like bright stuff for the wedding. Yeah, because for Malay wedding, Malay wedding is actually very grand. So you know, there's the catering, there's the clothes and everything, and then there's also like the gifts, which we exchange gifts. Like the bride has a gift for the groom, so the dowry is partly because of that.
So it's the wedding expenditures. That's
Yeah.
really what
Yeah,
it is.
That's what it
actually
is. And once
is,
again,
yeah.
that's going back to the whole different terminology. Different.
Mhm.
That's what it is.
Mhm.
Is
Yep.
we do it, but we don't realize what we're doing, type
Right.
of thing. So,
Interesting.
um,
So the wedding, did you guys have? You had it over there?
mhm.
And,
Yeah.
And so how did you do that? Like,
So I flew over, I think 4 or 5 days ahead of time.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, I brought all my side of the gifts and stuff over. They had my sizes, so they had gotten the clothing done,
mhm.
and then I was over there for the most part. It was just kind of we were fine for the first few days or whatever, and all the decisions had already been pretty much made, which was great for me. I didn't have to worry about anything.
Is that typical, that the woman makes most of the decisions for the wedding?
Yeah, generally, yes.
Okay, so it wasn't just the distance, it was also...
No, it's actually like, for example, like for a Malay wedding, like the bride's family will... So traditionally, the groom's family would come over to the bride's family, and they would do the solemnization and all, and then they have a feast there. And then once done, the groom will take the bride to the groom's side and another feast. So that is like the real Malay tradition. But for us, it's just like my parents wanted it to be clean and quiet. And
Okay.
Yep.
How many people were at your wedding?
Like during the actual sit down where I'm sweating and saying the Arabic, there was like 15, 16 people, I think. And
Is
then
there a video of that? We'd love to see that.
I think there was. I think they did get it.
But he did an amazing job, because for a Malay wedding is the groom has to say in Arabic word. So my name is Noreen, but in Arabic is Noreen.
Noreen.
Yes, Noreen. So he pronounced it very good. Even the guy who solemnized us, he was like amazed. He was like, even a Malay person couldn't do that, but you can do it. Yep.
So rather than being forewarned that I was going to have to speak Arabic at the wedding,
They threw it at you?
so her dad, just in conversation, like the day before, was like, hey, have you memorized this? You know, what, I forget the terminology of it. I'm like, what? And I'm looking at her, and she's like, oh, sorry. And I'm like,
so the day before.
They write it out for me, and I'm sitting there like, blah, 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 you know, and saying everything. And
Is it like vows, or is it prayers?
It's like a vow, but in Arabic.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah, so it's a very standardized, like it's not.
Do you know what it means in English? Either one of you?
Like I, Lawrence Summers, will take like kind of like the Christian.
It's a variation
Very
of the
similar,
Christian,
yeah.
and but it also has part of the Shahada in it as well, and so it's to tell you exactly what it was. It was, I mean, it was all a blur for me, honestly. I was trying not to mess up because she had warned me.
All weddings are a blur.
Right.
Yeah,
Yes.
I'm glad.
Well, she had explained to me that so my brother-in-law is Scottish, and her twin is got a much more difficult name. And when he tried to pronounce all that, they made him restart 3 times because he messed up. If you make a mistake, they make you reset it.
Recite 3
Wow.
times, yeah?
You have to start it all over.
Oh, wow.
So you go to a part and like, no, you have to, you know, basically they're kind of like, hey, you didn't say it all correctly, so it's not valid type
Right.
of thing. So, and when you're getting married, you have 2 male witnesses that are part of the family as well, and they have to sign off on your wedding certificate. And I was also one of the witnesses for my younger brother-in-law, and I was teasing him about it, like, hey, how many times am I gonna get to make you restart it? And he was getting real nervous. So you know, so I was fortunate enough to not have to say a very difficult name per se, but I got like 6 hours to memorize the thing, so I think it balanced out that way, because
Wow.
So
Are you guys legally married in the United States?
yeah, I mean, it carries over. The United States recognizes our marriage as well, but I mean, it's not like I'm looking for benefits for her. Like when I do my taxes, I do them as single because she doesn't have a social security number, so I'm paying the extra exorbitant
Because
tax.
my sister, they live here, but he's originally from Guatemala,
Okay.
and they got married in Guatemala, but they had to have a civil ceremony here before they had the religious ceremony there for
So-
it to be recognized.
So I think that just because how strong Singapore is with relations with here, it's recognized both ways.
Got it.
Like when she came in, she didn't need like a pre-approved visa or anything. She had an ESTA. So it was literally, she goes on, clicks a button, gets approval within like 2 or 3 minutes, and then she comes in and
I was nervous. I thought they're gonna take me into a room and interrogate me. Like,
yeah, no, it was a very smooth transition. I mean, their passport's stronger than ours, so they've got the 2nd strongest passport in the world, so they can.
Does that mean security wise?
Yeah, so they have when it comes to how many countries they are able to enter and exit
Okay.
without, because they're part of the shared visa program, or how many countries like them, they're
allowed.
Yeah, they always like kind of fight with Germany to be the top. Like sometimes they're the number one, and then Germany bumps them, and it's back and forth. But for the most part, for such a small country, they are very well liked.
So you guys have been married for,
It's 1 year now.
and did you change your name?
Yeah, I did.
How is that?
It's nice. I mean, it's like at work, everyone call me Mrs. Summers. So the first time I'm like, oh, it's a bit funny. So my boss, they would call me, Mrs. Summers, can I talk to you? I'm like, okay.
It takes some getting used to. It's an
Yeah.
interesting thing to go
Like
through.
yesterday, when we went to Wrigley,
Mm-hmm.
so they cross off Lawrence Summers, and I saw my name right there, Noreen Summers. I'm like, okay, I'm getting used to it.
Do you guys
Right.
want kids?
I imagine it was
Yeah.
tough for you, Gene, getting used to Cadcodian as the last name.
It took me like 3 months to say it,
Uh,
let alone
I
spell
couldn't
it.
even spell it in first grade, so it's like
Yeah.
um, Yeah, we do want kids. We're trying a lot to get them. For
a lot.
it is difficult because there is still the distance thing, but
Yeah.
it is definitely in the books
Cool.
to keep trying, and it comes down without when it happens. That's where we'll have to have the conversation. Like, do we want them born in the United States? Do we want them born in Singapore? Singapore does have some rules that are going to affect the child. They have compulsory military service or civil service, because you could be drafted into a service that is not military. You could have to do auxiliary police force, firefighting, things like that. You don't get a choice. They just,
And that's mandatory.
yes.
Yep.
So it comes down to if he's American, he is going to be allowed to live in Singapore and raised, but when he turns 18, it's like, hey, you got to do this or you're out type of thing. So, or if you are Singaporean, you do it. And so it comes down to what kind of choices do we want to give him type of
That's
thing.
interesting.
So, but for it, definitely he'll be raised in Singapore, so long as they let me
Is
in.
that for boys or girls or just boys?
Boys,
Just the boys.
They're just boys.
How many children do you guys want?
10.
One.
Wow.
One.
That's a very
One.
big difference.
There's a 1 in
One.
each of those answers. One has a 0 behind it.
One.
You guys are going to have a lot of conversations, I
Yeah.
think. Yeah. So, what would you guys, what would you say to someone who is kind of considering converting, or, kind of having this kind of multicultural type of relationship, and maybe, kind of trying to figure out how to navigate that? What kind of advice would you guys have?
I would say they would need to communicate like every day. Communication is key, especially for relationships like that, like multicultural or distance relationship. I think communication is the key, because from that you can talk you can talk about little things, like things that happens in your everyday life, makes you feel closer.
And I think for conversion for any religion, I think it comes down to really you have to look inside. You have to decide what is the purpose? Why am I doing this? Am I doing it for myself, or am I doing it for this because this is the rule? I have to do this, or because if you don't do it for yourself, then you shouldn't. You should always do it for yourself, but also do the research. Find out, how is this going to affect me long term? What are there rules that I'm going to have to follow, or is it simply a matter of this is a bridgeway to what my beliefs should be, or where I want them to be? But also, this day and age, there are so many, so much research out there. It's not like hundreds of years ago where you just had the Quran, or you just had the Bible, or you just had to go speak to this one individual. You can go online and you can find videos about a little of everything. You can find individuals that have walked that path. you can find people that have struggled in different things, and they found like, hey, this is actually how I'm applying this. Point in case is actually she sent me a video of an individual that had converted to Islam, and in the video, the individual was speaking about why they did it, and he explained that he had been looking at Buddhism and Christianity and Islam, and when he opened up the Bible and he went and spoke to priests, they had multiple applications to his questions. They were like, well, this is how we think that it's applied, and this is how it can, and it kind of changed every time and different people he spoke to. Whereas when he went and looked at the Quran and he spoke to everybody, they were like very specific, like this is where it goes. And for him, that was the right answer. It doesn't mean that's the right answer for everyone. Maybe people are looking for more versatility in their decisions, but the fact that was in the video and that was is something that all you have to do is go on YouTube and start researching and things like that. Do a lot of research at the end of the day, and don't it's the internet. Don't believe everything on the internet type of thing.
Yeah.
Go speak to people in real life as well, but definitely use all the resources available. But when it comes down to it, at the very end, it has to be something that it's your choice, and you're the one that you can't have those outside sources pushing you to do it. It has to be something that you do yourself.
Speaking of outside sources, I'm sure that you've run into any opinions or criticism, about obviously being in the military and then converting over to Islam, right? And so what would you say to people who have thoughts like that, especially here in the United States?
I think it comes down to just being PC and not using strong words here. I think it comes down to those individuals that are criticizing anything. They are the ones that have something wrong in their life. They're the ones that need to make the change themselves. Like you can't let them affect you, because those individuals that are expressing negativity or those individuals that are trying to bring you down, they're not worth it in life. Do
you think it comes from a lack of understanding?
Partially, I think that they're not educated in the correct manner. It doesn't mean that they're not smart or that they're not educated. I think that it just comes down to what they were taught is influencing how they're very Freudian in that sense. They didn't go and they didn't do the research themselves. They are they've got their blinders on.
Like a prejudgment.
Yes. Yeah. But I think when it comes down to it is their negative comments, and they're them making judgments on that. It shouldn't matter if I'm in the military or if I didn't serve or whatever. It should be, this choice is for me. My choices shouldn't affect you. Like, how is what I do on my daily life going to affect you at all? So it should be, I'm sorry that I'm making you unhappy, but at the end of the day, it's right for me and it's going to make me happy. I hope you enjoy your life and I hope you have a good time, and you should, just move about your own path type of thing. And I think that's what people need to consider doing, is just don't dwell on that negativity. It shouldn't be that they shouldn't affect you.
Mm-hmm. Did you have anything to add to that, Noreen?
Nope.
No.
So what is it that your partner does that they love you?
Little things like he would charge my phone before I go to sleep. I was like, oh, that's really sweet. I would just throw my phone on his desk and just go to sleep. And then just recently, he would download for me this show, like all episodes, a few episodes. I'm like, oh, that's really sweet. And then, besides that, when he travels here, like when we're dating, and he would travel here every 4 or 5 months. So I know that, he's the one.
For me, it's she puts up with me. No, she's just very, very warm and loving, and very, very. It's a matter of she doesn't have to do some things, but she does. For example, hey, I want to play my games or whatever. She's like, no, go ahead. I'm here. I just want to be in the room with you, and I just feel loved by her no matter what we're doing together. It's not you know, there is that additive of, oh, she's nagging me and stuff, but she does it like it's fun. You know, I love it. Like it's granted, you ask me that question in 20 years, we'll probably have a different conversation, but we're still kind of, I think, in that, even though it's been a year, we're still that honeymoon phase and stuff, but I think it's just a matter of, I just feel very loved by her, and she's very, very understanding of, hey, I'm still learning things in the relationship, especially when it comes to religious side, and she doesn't prejudge and quickly say, hey, you're not doing this right or whatever. It's more teaching and learning at the same time jointly. So I think that, you know, for me, that's kind of how she shows me that she loves me.
It's very obvious. I mean, we've known you for what, 8-9 years, something like that.
Yeah, you guys have.
We just met you today, but you look like you're at home. You look like really happy and really at peace.
Yeah.
And we wish you guys all the best.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lawrence and Noreen, for joining us on Couples Synergy today. This is quite a pleasure.
You know, human beings have been sharing stories for thousands of years to bond and to heal and to grow, and we hope that by you guys sharing your story, it's enriched your lives and the lives of our listeners.
Thank you.
For all you listening, please subscribe to our podcast and please leave us a review. If you have any questions, comments, or topic suggestions, please email us at contact@couplessynergy.com. For more information about Couples Synergy and our programs such as Relationship 101, the Couples Weekend Intensive, and our premier program called Couple to Couple, look us up online at couplessynergy.com. Until next time, synergize your life, synergize your love.
You have been listening to Couple Synergy with Dr. Ray and Jean Ketkodian. Couple Synergy was recorded, edited, and produced by Dr. Ray and Jean Ketkodian. Voiceover and music entitled Breathe and Let Go was recorded and composed by Gina Gonzalez.